What up, y'all? It's Dom, and today we're looking at a 2-year-old camera, the Ricoh GRiii, not just for street photography either. Is this the best everyday carry camera? Should you take a look at it? Is it worth your money? Let's get into it. In my never-ending quest to find the ultimate everyday carry camera, I'm always looking for a camera, but I have two major flaws. Number one, the cameras that are out there that have good enough image quality to satisfy my needs are usually just too big, too bulky, or have an interchangeable lens. What? An interchangeable lens system that makes that camera significantly bigger, i.e. like the ZV-E10 that just dropped from Sony. Fantastic little camera, really small, really lightweight, has a ton of features, but then you slap on a good enough lens on there, like an f2.8 or f4, and it makes it too big, too bulky, and too heavy for me to carry every single day. Or there are the smaller cameras that are on the market, like a ZV-1 or a G7X Mark III or like a RX107 that are really small, really lightweight, really compact. But to me, after using them and testing them, the image quality just isn't good enough for me to want to carry and leave my bigger cameras at home. But recently I have been exploring the Ricoh GRiii, and that is because up popped on my recommended feed was a new channel that I have never seen. It's called Sammy's Street Life. It's a street photographer. I think he's over in Europe somewhere. I'll put on the link below. And he's got these really awesome street photography videos that I started watching and kind of got addicted to. And he was shooting on a Ricoh GRiii. Now, I'm not a street photographer. I don't have the time really to shoot street, although I would like to. But I found myself really intrigued by the camera, not as a street photography camera, but as an everyday carry. Let me tell you exactly why and what this camera brings to the table. First of all, it's a 24.3 megapixel APS-C CMOS crop sensor. That's a really big deal in a camera this size. And speaking of size, it's only 4.3 inches long by about a little over 2 inches wide. So the camera is really, really small. I mean, put it in comparison, it's smaller than my iPhone mini and not that much more noticeable in weight. It only weighs about 9.07 ounces, which is roughly about a half a pound. Putting that in perspective of weight, this is my Leica Q, and this is about 1.5 pounds. So it's about a third of the weight of the Leica Q. So really throwing it in my pocket and carrying it around in my back pocket, I don't really notice it, and it's really, really convenient to have a crop sensor in something this small and this lightweight. Wrapping up that whole package, pairing that fantastic size and weight and the excellent image quality coming out of that sensor, pairing it with the 18.3mm f2.8 lens. Now, that lens is really sharp. It's just really stunning. Doesn't have chromatic aberration or really bad, what's it called? Barrel distortion, my God. Doesn't have very bad barrel distortion on it, but it's also really, really small. It pops out and protrudes only very slightly out of the front of the camera. And to me, that really adds to the convenience and pocketability of the camera as a whole. Even with this lens on, which I would never do, but I could throw it in my pocket and I still really notice it. But like every cheesy late night infomercial, I'm not done yet. It's got 3-axis in-body image stabilization, shoots full DNG RAW as well as JPEG, and shoots in 14-bit depth. All that to say, the image quality is absolutely superb. I was actually blown away. I had low expectations going in for image quality, just seeing as I've never shot Ricoh before. I've shot an old Ricoh film, I think really years ago, and didn't really care for it. Actually, I don't really remember the experience, to be honest with you, so I can't crap on it. But with that 14-bit depth, it's actually got really good, surprising dynamic range where I could push shadows and highlights, and I really didn't notice a lot of difference between this and some of my Sony full-frame cameras, the a7 III. The dynamic range was almost on par with that camera, which is saying so much, again, for the size and pocketability of this camera. And that's really what ties everything back. The image quality is really fantastic, and the dynamic range and saturation that you're coming out of the files is really great. But having that dynamic range and saturation and beautiful images coming out of a camera this size is mind-blowing. It's like unheard of. I mean, that's really what sets this camera apart, as does the low light capabilities. That's the biggest flaw for small cameras. That's because sensor size matters. If I have my iPhone on me or like an RX107, Shooting that camera in any type of indoor low lit capabilities comes out with straight trash images. I hate them. And in an iPhone, it slows down your shutter speed to do that slow, like night photography mode that's absolutely garbage, and you get always blurry images. Not the case with the Ricoh GR3. Low light capabilities are fantastic. It's subjective, I know, but you could push it up to about 6400 and still plenty usable images with a nice grain, like a beautiful grain that I didn't mind at all. Good noise. I mean, the noise control in this camera is really, really good. Even in JPEGs, I didn't mind shooting JPEGs in low light, which is just something you don't really hear of. It's something you don't do with small pocketable cameras. Now let's talk about physical design. It's got this really cool matte black finish with this nice grippy, I don't know, textile to it. I really liked it. It really feels good in the hand. It's small, but not really tiny where I'm fidgeting for controls or anything like that. It just fits nicely in your hand. It's got a nice little, I wouldn't call it even a grip. I'd call it just a little bump on the front to give you a little bit of texture, a little bit of control. I didn't find it slipping out at all. No EVF. That's kind of a flaw. More on flaws later, but no EVF at all. And the back touch screen is not, swivel, doesn't articulate at all, and doesn't rotate at all up or down. So kind of a flaw there, takes some getting used to. Also, no built-in flash, something that I saw a gripe for a lot of people online. I don't mind. I don't like shooting on camera flash at all. I like shooting everything off camera, and thankfully it does have a hot shoe, so you could throw on off camera and not have to worry about it. One of the biggest things I love about this camera is the user experience, and let me get into more of what I'm talking about. Ricoh does a fantastic job making this camera customizable, and not just customizable like other camera brands. Like, yeah, I've seen like on top, it's got different user profiles. So you can set your settings for profile 1, profile 2, or in this case, there's 3 different profiles. And that's really nice, right? You can set your settings and what you like and don't like. No, this camera takes it way, way beyond in customization. This is the most customizable camera I've ever experienced, and it's really, really fantastic. You can basically customize every button on here, the D-pad, the menu button, the function button. You can set up a function button to be a back button autofocus, which I loved. So now it just feels really good in the hand to back button autofocus. But not just that, it's got full manual controls, meaning it's got a front and back dial for shutter and aperture, and then you can quickly access your ISO on the D-pad. But everything is customizable. For instance, if I wanted to switch the shutter and aperture dials from front to back to front, so one is the shutter, one's aperture, I could switch and vice versa, you can absolutely do that. You could press in the back shutter dial and up pops a quick menu, so you can quickly access things like JPEG picture profiles or white balance or anything you want. But not just that, you can then customize inside that pop-up menu. You can basically hand pick what you want to pop up on that quick menu and in what order, and it just makes it for such a pleasant experience once you have the camera dialed into the settings that you like. I would say once I got it dialed to how I like it, this camera is probably the fastest and most intuitive camera I've ever shot as an extension of me. Meaning once I've learned it, which it is a little bit of a learning curve to get dialed into the camera as a shooter, but once I got there, man, am I fast with this camera. I can nail my shot faster than any other camera on the market even today because that customization. I can quickly change settings fast, get into my shot quickly, and get exactly what I want. Part of that is something called snap focus. Now that's something I haven't talked about yet, which I'll talk about now. Snap focus is a proprietary focus system that Ricoh has developed, and it's mainly for street photography. It comes from zone focus back on rangefinder cameras, which is absolutely probably the fastest way to focus on any camera. And what it is it's setting your focus point basically ahead of time. So if you know your aperture and you know your focal distance, the camera can quickly snap to that focus point and then shoot your image. So basically, let's say my light right here is about 3 feet away, so about a meter away. In snap focus, you could preset your focal distance to be a meter and a half, or 2 meters, and then you could set your aperture to know that anything within that distance, you can quickly snap to that focus point And then your camera and your image will be sharp and you'll be in focus. It leads to really fast shooting or being able to shoot at the hip or shoot without looking. And it really then leads to not really wanting an articulating screen or a flippy screen, because you could shoot high, you could shoot low, and with that snap focus or manual focus, zone focusing if you will, you can get your image and get that image in focus and know what you're shooting ahead of time without even really looking. And that brings me back to the point that, man, this camera is such a fantastic extension of myself as a shooter. Leads me to more hit rates, getting the images that I want faster, quicker, once I have everything dialed in. The camera's also got some really quirky things that I absolutely love. For instance, when the camera is off, you can press and hold the play button on the side, which is to review your images. The camera will then turn on and it'll pull up the last image that you shot. Then you could quickly power off the camera. Just something that's really cool. You don't also have to then power on the camera and cycle the lens to pop out and close every single time you just want to review images. I think that may save the lens motor in the long run, but I don't know, just a quirky feature that I absolutely really love. Another feature that I haven't seen on many other cameras, I think I've seen it on a Nikon, an older Nikon before, is something called highlight weighted metering. Now, of course, it's got your normal metering modes, center weighted, multi-weighted, whatever, but it's got something called highlight weighted metering. And for me as a photographer, God, I fell in love with this. It basically meters for the highlights as the priority of the image, so you're not gonna blow out any part of your image. And the beauty is, because this camera's got such fantastic dynamic range and it shoots in that 14-bit depth, you can pull the shadows up in post, meaning you're never gonna have any part of your image improperly exposed. And I really like that. It really just, in shooting it, it doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but after shooting it, man, it led me to so many more images that were usable, that didn't have as many blowouts, and the highlights were just so much more usable. And I'm one to, I tend to overexpose just a tad, if not a stop and a half, but neither here nor there. This highlight weighted metering really led me to getting much more beautiful images that were properly exposed. A couple of things that were kind of quirky, but things I absolutely love. It does have a 2 GB of internal storage, so I found that to be actually kind of cool if I'm switching memory cards on the go or my memory card's full. It's got a little bit extra. I think it stands like 21 photos you can fit on there, which is kind of cool. It's just something I liked having. Also loved having the mechanical leaf shutter in here. Super, super quiet, which of course they designed for street photography, which is awesome. But the thing I loved about it is with a mechanical leaf shutter, you can use external flash and shoot at much higher shutter speeds and still be able to get your external flash to not cut off in the image. With a normal camera that doesn't have a leaf shutter, you can only shoot at like a shutter speed of like 1/200th of a second when it's on body. This, you don't have to worry about that. It's really cool, something nice to have. Of course, it's got Bluetooth LE, Wi-Fi capabilities, and USB-C, which I absolutely love because I can charge it with my one of 300,000 USB-C cords that I have laying around. It's got something called a photo raw editor in the camera, which I thought was kind of a gimmicky at first. Basically, you can edit your raw photos in camera and change a lot of the settings like crop, saturation, contrast, highlight, shadows. I mean, you could do a lot with it. Edit it in post, then process the image and send it over to a mobile device and be able to share it quickly. Now, I find it to be really, really useful if you're like on vacation or traveling, you don't want to be carrying your laptop or whatever editing device with you. It is a little bit cumbersome. It's not something that I would do all the time. Like I've seen some street photographers that's how they edit their photos, is just in camera. Kind of crazy to me. I still like bringing it into Lightroom, but if you are in a pinch, it's nice to be able to do it. Speaking of sharing your images quickly, I am not a JPEG shooter. I always shoot RAW, but this camera actually changed that because of the positive film picture profile that you can shoot in JPEGs. I love it. I love it so much, and I'm not like a picture profile type of guy. The only other time I've ever loved a picture profile was in the X100V from Fuji. That's got some nice picture profiles. But I love this positive film look so much in JPEGs that I actually shoot in RAW plus JPEG just to have that JPEG on there. It is so subjective, person to person or whatever, but it quickly and so accurately matches what I was doing in post-processing with my RAW images that the JPEG side by side almost looked identical identical, if not better than how I would edit it anyway. So being able to shoot in such a nice picture profile, you can quickly share those JPEGs, share them quickly, send them to whoever you want, and it's just really, really nice. So with all these positive, let's talk about some of the negatives, because of course this camera isn't perfect, although some of the cult following would lead you to believe otherwise. I do have some flaws with this camera. Number one, the battery life is horrendous. It sucks. Now, I don't know, because I bought this camera used, and I'm waiting on some batteries that are third-party batteries, because I'm not paying full price for Ricoh batteries. But I digress. I bought this camera used, so it may be a well-used battery that I'm working with, but I never got much over 200 shots on a fully charged. I mean, I maybe got like 230, 240, but with any type of reviewing and using the touchscreen and in-body image stabilization on, that like really trickled down to really about 200 usable shots, maybe 220, and then my battery was done. So I really have a hard time getting through a day of shooting, if not a half a day of shooting, if I'm shooting a lot. Also, video is horrendous. The video sucks on this camera. Not only is the video poor, I mean, it's just HD and it's a couple years old, so I can't be that big of a critic, but don't have manual controls. You don't have like a mic jack in here, so it's really lacking for video. I don't shoot video at all in this thing. It's kind of like the Leica Q, it just it's not good. In terms of physical design, yes, I have the same gripes of everyone else. This front ring falls off so easily. I like the design of having like an adapter ability on the lens, but this front ring cover is such a bad design. It doesn't twist a lot on there, so it doesn't give you a lot to lock onto. So just by bumping it makes it loose. I've already lost like 2 of them, so it is really annoying. I've also seen some concerns with a lot of Ricoh GR3s breaking from the D-pad dial in the back. It does feel fragile to me, but mine works perfectly fine after a lot of use with it. And I use that D-pad a lot for reviews and stuff. It still works fine. It isn't loose at all. Some other things that I did find flaws with it are in low light, the autofocus does struggle a little bit. It is slow. It doesn't hunt. It's still like accurate, but it's slow to actually find focus. So I found that to be a little bit annoying. And then also the metering really slows down in low light. So it does become a much slower to get your images. It's not as fast. But I'm not complaining, because overall, I'm just happy to have a camera that can produce quality images in low light, even if it takes me a little bit more time. But my biggest flaw overall is that this camera is not weather sealed. And that's hugely disappointing for me, because I'm carrying this camera every single day. I'm putting it on tabletops and putting it on park benches and other things. And a lot of times I want to shoot in the rain, or I want to shoot in inclement weather or at the beach. And because it's not weather sealed, I'm always concerned with a little bit of moisture or dust or whatever condensation getting inside the camera. And because it's a fixed focal length, you can't get really in there to clean it out or whatnot. So I'm always concerned with that damaging the camera long term. I would love to see in the GR4 a weather sealed and better battery life. That would make this camera a hell of a lot better. Those are certainly not deal breakers in my opinion. This is still a really fantastic camera. In fact, I would argue it is the best camera for its size and weight. Pound for pound, the best camera on the market even today for image quality. Now, who would I recommend this camera for? Because that is a bit quirky, something you need to understand. Number one, this camera is perfect for photographers. Like if you're a photographer looking for an everyday carry, or a camera to just beat up, have in your pocket all the time, which you should have a camera on you all the time if you're a photographer, this is the camera for you. Highly recommend. Like that is exactly how it feels into my boat. It's the perfect everyday carry camera where I can just document life, whether it's for my blog or just personal social media, or carrying as like another additional camera on a wedding or a job to shoot behind the scenes type stuff. Man, perfect camera. Who is this camera not for? And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. I think you do have to have some photography skills to master this camera and utilize its full potential, meaning customize it, understand the settings, knowing snap focus, knowing aperture, knowing manual focus and manual controls. Those are all things that take a little bit of photography skill. So if you are an average parent or average consumer that just wants something a little bit more automated of a camera, this probably isn't the camera for you. Also, if you're not skilled or comfortable with the 28mm focal length, this is also not the camera for you, because with only that 24 megapixels, it doesn't give you a lot of data to crop in. So I wouldn't say it is worthy of like a 50mm crop in post. So if you're a parent taking this camera to Disneyland and you're not comfortable with 28mm, you're really gonna struggle, you know, if your daughter's on stage or something and you're gonna want a little bit more length, again, not the camera for you. But if you are like a hobbyist photographer or a weekend warrior, you have a little bit of photography knowledge, I would absolutely recommend this camera. If you want to spend a little bit of time, a little bit of learning curve, understanding the camera, getting it dialed into how you like it, you're gonna get some really stunning high quality images that you can print really large because of the sensor size. Just a fantastic camera, really good image quality, and just small enough to be able to carry with you all the time for travel or whatever. Highly recommend the GR3, especially in 2022. Right now, this camera is, you know, on the used market. I'm seeing them for $650, $680, and brand new, they're only $850. They came out with a street version. They also came out with a really cool GR3 X version that's got a 40mm focal length. So if you did need a little bit more reach or you like that focal length more, I would check out that camera. I hope to review that one soon. I'm bringing you some value. If I am, hit me with a thumbs up and subscribe below for more awesome videos. My next video, I'm probably gonna compare the Leica Q to the Ricoh GR3. If you love the GR3 and you love this price point, I would also check out this video for the Canon M50 Mark II versus the ZV-1. Two awesome cameras that are also right in this price point. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.